Understanding the context of game theory means understanding the context of interactions in general. Theoretically, it's the observation of the way that order forms in the presence of much more disorder. Entropy, or disorder, is the norm even though the order is referred to as normative. It's a bad term, but it's because of what is focused on as opposed to what is observed as a whole. Many studies have observed the strategies represented in game theory to exist in all forms of life, from microbes to humans. In all of the observations, there was a theme of cooperation. The strategies were to support those who are related and or relied on. In the more complex life, this also included those who were cared about. In the late 1700s, Adam Smith questioned what was actually in an individual's interest. He postulated that competition was in essence cooperative because cooperation was in the interest of the individual. It's the many hands makes the workload lighter argument. It's observed that the standard of living in all species is more favorable with cooperation. This is something that Darwin realized in his later years, and game theory formalized in more recent years. It all seems to revolve around natural risk management. This is an equation that expresses it. It states that the difference between two things is equal to the combination of two other things. The statement is, the difference between entropy and extinction is the sum of normative and novel influence. What this means is, the difference between the disorder that exists and the consequences of total failure is the amount of cooperation and harmless or new behaviors that exists. It weighs the helpful and or benign behaviors against the ones that are harmful and or not so useful. Normative influence is sometimes referred to as symbiosis. This is a more common term that might make it a little more familiar. It's the cooperation that has mutual benefit. It's the cooperation that builds natural systems. It's also part of the nature of all species. It's not in the interest of a predator to go after the big healthy breeders. It takes less energy to go after the smaller sickly ones, and it keeps their pantry stocked. Cooperative conservation is in the nature of predators because it's in the interest of predators. It's in the interest of the predators to have a large food supply, which works out well for the survival of their prey. Symbiosis is the essence of game theory. The normative cooperation is in the interest of all in the game. The basic understanding of game theory is a choice of three strategies. Tit for tat is of course what comes around goes around. It's just the mirroring of behaviors and interactions. If one individual isn't being supportive of the group tends to not support the individual. It also happens with and is expressed with interactions between individuals. Here's a binary model of it. The zeros are cooperation, the ones are exploitation. From left to right, you see that B exploited in the first interaction and A made them pay for it in the second. All in all, the end result was equivalent. No one got over on the other. This is the most effective model, but it does have a flaw. What if there was a problem that is mistaken for exploitation? Forgiving tit for tat is a strategy that corrects for signal noise or confusion. If there's an instance of lack of cooperation running long, an act of forgiveness can get it back on track again. An individual can't really be expected to pay for something that wasn't their fault. This has an obvious exploit in it, though. Pavlov, not associated with the behavioral scientists that did conditioning studies on dogs, is a strategy to exploit. If the exploit is forgiven, it results in a one-up for the one exploiting it. If the one keeps using the exploit, it's a one-up each time. This can become a big problem in the long run. That and the fact that mistakes aren't very frequent is why tit for tat drives the other strategies into extinction or outperforms them in the trials that were run in the studies. The essence of game theory is obviously not self-servitude or egalitarian outcomes where the outcomes are equal. The essence is getting mutual benefit from cooperation. It's not always equal benefit either. There are many types of risk and many degrees of effort. Those who put in more effort or take more risk are often given more consideration. There are other games happening along with this choice of 3 games. One of the individuals in a colony of naked mole rats is allowed to stuff themselves until they become enormous without doing any work for it. This is because during the rainy season, they stick their big keister in the entrance to the colony to keep the rain from flooding in. They of course never get to go outside, and while they're plugging the entrance, they're at risk to be eaten by predators that know where there might be a big juicy naked mole rat. It lives a dull life until it has to take great risk, and the other members of the colony respect its importance. In economies, these games are seen everywhere. There are Pavlov strategies in predatory lending, tit for tat in negotiations, CEOs being paid large sums to create jobs and stocks that grow, and many more. This is a very powerful tool for economic analysis and even just trying to understand the functions of the systems. Neither of these are possible without it in its proper context, though. Out of context, it's not very useful at all, and the outcomes won't likely be so good for those who use it in self-servitude.